Okay, good evening. I'm going to call the Missoula City Council meeting to order. Would you all please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay. I'll be standing in for Mayor Engen tonight, and apologies if it's a little rocky. I haven't run one of these in a while. So our first item, as always, is roll call. And we have all members present tonight with the exception of Ms. Jones and Mayor Engen. Next up, we have approval of the minutes. Are there changes to the minutes? Seeing none, those will be approved. Is there any public comment on items not listed on our agenda? And what I'm going to do is take in-person comment first. So you're welcome to come on up and just state your name for the record and try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes, please.
Bill Hankinson, Ward 6.
Oh, I haven't turned myself on.
So last Veterans Day, I went to the ceremony at the Doughboy, and it was quite disappointing.
This one,
The Legion
Microphone.
yeah, mute it.
brought a sound system that didn't work. And at first I thought maybe, I'll just help with the sound system. And I'd offered to do that. I might wind up buying them a microphone or something. But beyond that, shouldn't have needed a microphone. There shouldn't have been any traffic at that intersection. And there was lots of traffic at that intersection, back and forth. 100 years ago, I wasn't here. That wouldn't have happened. The respect for Armistice Day, Veterans Day was so high that the idea of traffic interrupting a ceremony would not happen. They weren't all wrong. Allowing a full flow of traffic past that intersection at that ceremony does not show respect for the veterans. I think it needs to be corrected. I think that intersection needs to be closed. We shouldn't have traffic going by there when we're trying to have that ceremony. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I've had my say. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for your comments and thank you for your service. Anyone else care to comment?
Mark McMillan, Ward 6. I'm actually Bill's neighbor. He brought this idea to me and I said, well, yeah, let's go down to city council and see what we can do. We've got the animal walk, well, at least in the past, the animal walk, Sunday streets, River City Roots. I was going to see if anybody on council might be able to kind of take this bull by the horns. I pulled up the MDT special use because Broadway is going to be probably listed as a state controlled road. It doesn't seem that tough. It's one page, pretty simple, but rather than fill this out with an individual's name, the hope is to have like the city of Missoula be the applicant or maybe somebody from the Legion or VFW. But yeah, just in running with this, you guys would know how to do this best, or the people that run all these other events that we have. So rather than bring you this big mess, it was like, here's a few examples. I will draft an email from Bill and I, just so there's an official request to all of council for this. But some of the ideas were, like he said, closing that intersection would be, and maybe I was hoping to meet Chief White for the first time tonight. Doesn't look like he's here. But yeah, there's a big veteran, well, usually police officers, there's a decent number of them are veterans. So there's always a money issue. Who's going to pay for redirecting traffic? But one of the thoughts was to detour westbound traffic on Broadway right at Higgins, and then detour eastbound traffic right at Woody and Broadway. And that would keep that corner closed, and maybe look at just limiting traffic south side of Pine, north end of Ryman, and north side of Main, south end of Ryman there. But assuming there's a consistent time for this ceremony every year, and Bill's usually a part of it, this seems like it's less than an hour. So we didn't think this was too big an ask, but we know it's Broadway. But yeah, from there, if you could, with that email, if someone's going to take it by the horns, if they could just keep us or keep me posted by email from that so I can update Bill, let him know how it's going. And then if there's anything that can be asked of me for contact, just go ahead and run with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Mr. McMillan. And it has, and it is an MDT route. You're correct on that, but we'll connect you to the correct folks, and I'll make sure that gets routed
Yeah, I
properly.
can, if you want, if I have permission to approach, I can just give this to you.
Sure.
I'm sure this is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience tonight care to comment?
Hey, Joe again. Saw a couple eyes glaze over, and I was also a little nervous, and I think I came across a little more aggressive than I needed to last week. So this week I'm going to go back in my comfort zone. I brought some props, and I'm going to teach you, I think, something that's very invaluable in America. It's how to spot people who don't know what they're doing in tactical gear. We're going to do that with holsters and body armor. So this is what's called a plate carrier, the most common form of body armor currently. This is not a very good one. I wouldn't recommend getting this if you were worried about getting shot at. But the reason it's called a plate carrier is it carries these things. This is a ceramic RMA model 1155, level 4 NIJ certified ceramic plate. That means I can shoot it with a bullet up to 30-06. It'll crack, but it won't penetrate. If you're wearing it correctly, you shouldn't die. You'll just feel like you got punched by God. So there are two things you'll notice about this. The first thing is that without a plate in it, this thing is a bad fashion accessory. It doesn't do anything. The second thing you'll notice is that it has to cover the things that are keeping you alive. So to do that, the top of it goes up by your collarbone, the bottom goes below your diaphragm, keeps all of the things that keep the blood and the air moving nice and safe. What you'll see a lot of people do who don't know what this is for is they wear it like a tank top, and this thing ends up down here, which is really good for protecting ARPA-funded steak dinners, less good for keeping you alive. I bring that up because if you go down to the camps and you see the Rogers International employees down there, you'll see a lot of empty plate carriers and a lot of plate carriers that are protecting food babies. The other thing I want to talk about really quick are holsters. So this is my personal holster. It's a level 2 retention holster. It means there's two ways that it keeps a firearm in the gun. First way is it just fits very tightly so the gun doesn't wiggle around much. Second way is it has this little band of plastic that flips down when I push this button, right? It's pretty standard for law enforcement. I bet your guy over here probably has a level 2 or 3 holster. This is called a Serpa holster from Blackhawk. This one cost me about 140 bucks. This costs about 50. I picked it up at Cabela's today. It's also level 2. The button you push is here. These are banned by law enforcement. They're banned by all the tactical shooting courses that I've taken because these are dangerous. Because what you'll see is you go to pull your weapon, you initiate the release with your trigger finger. And if you're stressed out, that pressure stays up, your hand's here, and you can go on YouTube and watch a lot of people punch holes through their legs with using these holsters. You'll also see these being used by Rogers International employees at the camps. So all of those things together kind of lead me to make 3 conclusions. The first conclusion is there is a dangerous lack of safety and training among RI employees. That's a huge one. For me, as a very safety conscious individual, that's enormous. The second thing has to do with that this is a tacit acknowledgement that this equipment is not necessary at those camps. Those people aren't smuggling 30-06 rounds into the camp. They're not pointing guns. I've been working there for years. I have access to this stuff. It's never even crossed my mind that I need it. And the third thing is that these people are now walking around our streets. They're a safety hazard and a liability, not a safety asset. Now, these are just 2 of the easiest things to spot. This is also good if you go to a protest and you see a bunch of militia guys who are trying to scare people. It's a good way of figuring out who's actually a threat and who's a safety hazard. But I'd be happy to talk about the other failures that I've seen from their staff. But I think Something I would like the council to keep in mind is that these things, especially the aesthetic problems, can be fixed in a week. Dave Pritchard could hop on his guys' butts. They could shape up and look right, but training takes time. And it's going to be a big problem for these people who are untrained and clearly don't take their job seriously enough to protect their own lives and have gear that could hurt themselves. I think that's a serious problem. It's one of my biggest issues with them right now. And I would like just you to have that in the back of your minds as you think about this. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments. Anyone else care to comment tonight? Anyone in our virtual audience care to comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our next item of business, which is announcing our committee meetings, committee membership appointments, and changes to committee agendas. Ms. Rabine.
Thanks, Jordan. So let's look at this week's committee schedule. City Council committees are meeting this Wednesday, April 13th, and the first committee of the day is Budget and Finance Committee. Budget and Finance is starting at 9:45 in the morning and going until 11:35. They have 3 items on their agenda. One is a reappointment to the Missoula Redevelopment Agency Board. There's a resolution for equipment leasing agreement. And finally, an appointment to the Civic Television Advisory Committee. That committee meeting will be followed by the Land Use and Planning Committee. Also meeting this coming Wednesday on the 13th. And that meeting starts at 11:50 and goes until 12:35. There's only one item on that agenda, and that is the phase development review for phases 2 and 3 of the Remington Flats subdivision. The committee of the whole will meet from 1:05 to 1:50. They'll be taking up a contract for the Scott Street Community Land Trust loan and a United funding round for Affordable Housing Trust Fund recommendation. I think the staff are bringing forward a proposal there to allocate some money out of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The Public Safety, Health, and Operations Committee will meet from 2:05 to 3:15, and they will be doing appointments for the Food Policy Advisory Board. The Climate Conservation and Parks Committee will meet from 3:30 to 3:40 in the afternoon, taking up appointments to the Open Space Advisory Committee, and Public Works and Mobility Committee will round out the day, meeting from 3:55 to 4:40. And they'll be taking up appointments to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, as well as a bid award with MIDI Excavating for South 3rd Street West. That's this week's committee schedule.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Are there any changes to the committee schedule? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is our consent agenda. Ms. Rabine again.
Okay. Hang on just a minute. I'll hop over here. All right. There we go. Okay. Let's make that a little bit bigger. This is tonight's consent agenda. Get that to be just a little bit bigger on everyone's screens. So consent agenda tonight, it looks like we have, I think it was 7 items when I looked earlier. Yes. So the first item, as always, is to pay the city's bills. And we are approving the accounts payable in the amount of $691,596.67 for checks that are dated April 12th, 2022. Number 2 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a fiscal sponsorship agreement with Missoula Community Foundation through Missoula Gives for the benefit of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Number 3 is to approve the resolution vacating 2 40-foot wide public utility easements adjacent to Knowles Addition number 3, block 85, lots 1, 2, and 3, and certificate of survey number 6685, lot tract A. For those of you wondering what that is in English, it's located on South 2nd Street West. And number 4 is to confirm the mayor's reappointment of Babak Rost Giffard to the Police Commission for a term that begins May 1st, 2022 and expires on April 30th of 2025. Number 5 is first reading and preliminary adoption on an ordinance. Folks, tonight, City Council is setting a public hearing on May 2nd, 2022, and preliminarily adopting an ordinance amending Chapter 2.80 of Missoula Municipal Code entitled Residency Requirements for Emergency Public Safety Employees to change the distance from the city that peace officers and firefighters may live from a 30-minute to a 45-minute average reasonable response time. This ordinance also includes minor amendments to reflect current law and repeals an exception that's on our books that no longer applies to current employees. Number 6 is also an ordinance. City Council is doing the first reading and preliminary adoption on an ordinance and setting a public hearing on April 18th, 2022 to amend Title 20, Sections 20.85010, 020 and 095 as described in attachment A to conform with new state law on standards for public forums. And the council will be referring this matter to the Land Use and Planning Committee for discussion only after the public hearing. And that presentation will be on April 20th of 2022. And finally, number 7 is to set a public hearing on April 18th of 2022 for the phased development review of Remington Flats subdivision phases 2 and 3 for property that's legally described as a portion of tract 9 of Certificate of Survey 3176 located in the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 12, Township 13, North Range 19. Range 20 West, Principal Meridian, Montana. Hey, in Missoula, it's either range 19 or range 20. And refer the item to the Land Use and Planning Committee as a pre-public hearing informational item on April 13th.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Sir, are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Any public comment? Seeing none, we can have a roll call vote.
Public comment? None? Yeah, okay. On the consent agenda, hang on. There we go. Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Carlino,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Nugent,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Vasika,
Yes.
and West.
Yes.
And would any of you like to change your vote? That is 11 ayes and 1.
Okay, the consent agenda passes. Pardon me, I'm unmuting the wrong device. All right, the consent agenda passes and we can move on. There are no, to the best of my knowledge, there are no comments from city staff, agencies, the community forum, neighborhood councils, boards, commissions, or authorities. There are a few proclamations. With poverty of screen space, so bear with me. First, whereas a quality education is one of the significant foundations for the continuing success of our state, our country, and our society at large. And in the city of Missoula, we strive for the betterment of all citizens through an increased focus on education and sharing. And whereas one of the leading global advocates for the advancement of education, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson of righteous memory, stressed the importance of moral and ethical education as the bedrock of humanity and the hallmark of a healthy society. And whereas through providing the possibility of an excellent education for all, especially children, with which to gain knowledge through rigorous study, we can create hope for a brighter, kinder, and more united and prosperous future in the lives of so many. And whereas April 12th, 2022 will mark 120 years since the Rabbi's birth, and the date will be celebrated across the United States and around the globe in tribute to the Rabbi's vision, guidance, and leadership. Now, therefore, John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula in the state of Montana, hereby recognizes the 12th day of April 2022 as Education and Sharing Day, and calls upon government officials, educators, volunteers, and citizens to reach out to those within your communities and work to create a better, brighter, more hopeful future for all. Is there anyone in our attendee list tonight who's here to comment on this tonight? Seeing none, we have another proclamation as well, and that is for National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. Whereas the safety and well-being of its citizens continues to be one of the foremost concerns of the city of Missoula, ensuring that safety and well-being requires the ability to receive calls for help and immediately send responders to provide that help. And whereas 911 is the first critical link in the chain in delivering public safety services, and whereas the safety of those responding to emergencies is also of great concern to the city of Missoula, and whereas the telecommunicators who work in 911 display a superior level of commitment, dedication, and professionalism in accomplishing their mission of receiving calls for help from citizens, dispatching emergency response agencies, and maintaining a communication link with the responders for safety purposes. And whereas those same telecommunicators often work extraordinarily long hours and difficult schedules to provide this service to the public and to ensure the safety of responders, but often go unrecognized. Now, therefore, John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula in the state of Montana, recognizes the week of April 10th through 16th, 2022 as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And we thank those folks for their service. We have two items for final consideration tonight, and they're both in the Land Use and Planning Committee. The first is a plat adjustment request for the relocation of a 10-foot public access easement on Lot 1 of the McNett Flats subdivision. Ms. West.
All right, the recommended motion is to approve the McNett Flats plat adjustment request for relocation of a 10-foot wide pedestrian access easement on Lot 1 of the McNett Flats subdivision as shown on the submitted affidavit of correction in accordance with the City of Missoula subdivision regulations, Article 7, Section 7-040, and based on the findings of fact in the staff report, subject to one condition of approval.
Thank you. That motion is in order. And before that, I should have closed the public hearing and called for public comment. Is there anyone here to provide public comment on this item? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed, and there's a motion on the floor. So discussion on the motion. Okay, seeing none, we can have a roll call vote.
Okay, on the McNett Flats.
I'm sorry, Ms. Rayban, I do have a public comment. I'm going to go
Okay.
to that. Okay, Stevens L. We ask you provide your name for the record, and you should be able to unmute and provide your comment.
Hi, this is Lauren Stevens, the case planner on this project. I just wanted to note in the motion that you read, it did say pedestrian access easement, and I wonder if we should just amend that to say public access easement.
Thanks for highlighting that. Without objection, we'll change that.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Raybein.
Thanks, Lauren. On the plat adjustment request, Becerra,
Yes.
Carlino,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Nugent,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Basika,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
and would any of you like to change your vote? That is 11 ayes. and one absent.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rabine. Our next item is item 8.2. This is the Greeno Heights major subdivision and rezoning. We've had a public hearing on this and we've had 2 informational committee meetings. Is there any additional public comment before I close the public hearing? Nancy Selden, you should be able to give us your comment.
I need to apologize ahead of time. I have a grandchild with me, which is why I'm not at the meeting, and he's raising a bit of a ruckus. I did write a letter to all of you, and I think you've probably received it. I hope you've read it. I expect that you will go ahead and approve the 3 requests and the overall request. I would just like to say, as a longtime member of this community, that I think it is a mistake to give the variance to OK variance 1 for the reasons I outlined in the letter. It's a very steep slope. And I think it's a bad idea. I also think that changing the zoning, what that allows is it allows for the buildings along the eastern end of the subdivision to go even further east. The buildings, the area allowed to build in. And I think given its proximity to Greeno Park, that is also a mistake. I know it's too late for this, but I would really hope the city would make better use of that sort of open space for lots that would be not as exorbitantly expensive as I just know these will be, and that would be better for the young people in our community and senior citizens, or in some way create more innovative use of the little bit of open space that we still have within the city limits. So thank you for listening, and I guess I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Would anyone else care to comment? Okay, seeing no additional comments, the public hearing is now closed. And Ms. West.
Jordan, would you like each motion separately, or do you want to take them all together?
I think we can take them all together. Ms.
Okay.
Rabine, is that okay with you?
That is fine as drugs are with me.
Okay, perfect. So then we have 4 motions, and I will read all of them, and then I'll comment if that's appropriate. Okay, so the first motion is to adopt an ordinance to rezone the subject property located at 1006 West Greeno Drive from R8 residential to OP1 open space to a different configuration of R8 residential and OP1 open space based on the findings of fact and conclusion of law in the staff report. The second motion before us today is to approve the variance request to allow lots 19 and 20 to have less than 2,000 square feet of contiguous buildable area. The third motion is to approve the variance request to allow no boulevard and a 6-foot street side sidewalk along the open space parcel adjacent to West Greeno Drive without a boulevard. And the final motion is to approve the Greeno Heights subdivision preliminary plat application subject to the recommended conditions of approval based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report. And if I can speak to it for a
Go ahead.
brief
Thanks.
moment. So I am in support of this project, or the 4 motions. I want to highlight that this doesn't change the zoning. It changes the configuration of the zoning and which parcels are where. And this is in part a bit of a cleanup required from our transition from Title 19 to Title 20 that basically stated that any time there's a split zone parcel, the more conservative zoning applies. I think this is the first time I've seen a split zone parcel that included OP1 open space. It usually is two different residential zonings or something a little less dramatic. But also want to note that this open space isn't public access in either, I guess, in either configuration, and that the setbacks that exist on the different lots actually move the buildings back further from Greeno Park than what we see today. If you walk along the trail today, you can see the existing house from the trail, and you won't be able to see any of these. I think the variances make sense based on the limitations, the geographic limitations, and also the right-of-way limitations that exist today. I am super cognizant of the pressures that exist in our transportation network and on our pedestrian network in this area. And I think, you know, those are super important. And hopefully, as you know, we see more development, not just here, but everywhere in the Rattlesnake. There's lots of smaller projects that are happening all along both Greeno Drive and, you know, everywhere in town, really. These pressures are just going to increase, and hopefully we'll be able to, you know, take the most pressing areas and prioritize them, you know, in the future to address these safety issues.
Thank you, Ms. West. Anyone else care to comment? Ms. Becerra?
Thanks. I just wanted to expand and clarify a little bit some comments that I made a couple of weeks ago. And that is that I truly believe that context sensitive design is the most appropriate tool when designing and developing a piece of land. So taking into consideration the natural environment, the surrounding, the availability and condition of infrastructure is paramount. This site obviously has some constraints, and I do believe that 20 lots on this piece of property falls under the lower end of the spectrum of density. And I would not encourage us to put more density on this lot. Certainly, I wouldn't advocate for apartment buildings to be put on this place for all the reasons that I stated earlier, and the fact that we have a land use plan and zoning regulations that I think would make it difficult. But I do want to say that it is important to consider who is out there trying to enter the housing market. And while 20 lots of pretty much the same size will yield homes of about the same size, that will yield a neighborhood that's very homogeneous and not really representative of who we are as Missoulians and who we want to continue to be as Missoulians. And because of that, I think that 20 lots of different sizes would have been a better representation of what the needs are in our community. So I see this as a missed opportunity for providing to Missoulians an opportunity to enter the housing market. Having said all of that, this is private property, and I don't think we don't have any tools to control or dictate how that land can be developed. I think our best approach is to do what our staff has done, which is to mitigate the impacts that are going to come inevitably with any development in Missoula. So for those reasons, I will be supporting this development, but I would encourage developers out there to really think about who is out there trying to become a homeowner in Missoula and provide opportunities for those members of our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Cheryl?
Yeah, thanks. And I always feel like it's kind of a funny format that we discuss it 1 week, we talk about it in committee meetings, and then we just vote on it. You know, I know we have the opportunity to make comments, but I would just like to say that I appreciate that we had a couple of meetings in committee to ask all the questions that we asked about transportation. And I know that many of us had concerns around the transportation piece, and that's usually, since my tenure on council, is usually kind of a struggle with any new development, with any density, even if it's not as much density as everyone wants. I do also appreciate that we had the opportunity to ask questions around erosion, around building on that slope, as well as environmental mitigation during the construction process with the creek so close. You know, obviously drainage is going to be a big issue. I do like what they've done with the open space and the reconfiguration of that. And the bottom line is, even though it may not be a lot of density, it is on a road that has some real challenges and isn't going to be fixed tomorrow. And for the reason that we really need housing, and I think that we can put some of that in this place that we need, even if it won't be affordable necessarily. I'm going to be supporting it.
Thanks. Mr. Carlino?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for everybody who engaged with this project on Engage Missoula and who sent in comments to us. I know this is just about 2/3 of a mile from our downtown, and I know that R8 zoning means that the local government is only allowing for single family homes to be built with an average of 8,000 square foot lots. And looking at other zoning options that fall under the growth policy, for example, like RT 5.4 would allow for roughly up to 92 units maximum on this area, according to city staff. And I know city council doesn't vote on developments, of course, but we do vote on zoning, and restricting the zoning of any residential neighborhood to only allow legally for single family homes is a regressive policy.
Anyone else? Ms. Savage?
Thank you. And I'd just like to echo some of the things that I also saw on Engage Missoula as well. And thank you to everyone that took the time to email me and provide comments on Engage Missoula. I am going to vote for this, but I'm not going to like it. I'm just going to be really honest about it. I have a lot of concerns about this proposal, and I'm going to list them just because I want them to be on the public record. But they largely have to do with traffic. I feel like we were not given any sort of traffic studies on the volume of the number of cars or the speed at which the cars travel down Duncan Drive to Greeno. I don't live in the Rattlesnake, but I do frequent this area quite a bit as a pedestrian, and I can tell you that cars go awfully fast. The positioning of where this particular subdivision will be, I have concerns about the left turn that will come out of there, the crosswalk that's proposed with this subdivision. And I also have concerns about an existing crosswalk that's at North Second and Greeno that's unstriped and is an ADA crosswalk, and it's already has, I think, some visibility issues. In terms of, you know, the sort of the grading and those sorts of things, I think those environmental mitigations seem to have been answered fairly well, but I do think that there are many user-created trails that already come off of this slope. I went and looked at it the other day, even in the gulch that's there. And so I have concerns that without creating trails, that we will officially creating trails, we will have more trails that get created, which will contribute to erosion and all of the things that we're concerned about with the grading as well. I have concerns about the 700 feet of sidewalk, 700 feet or so, that's going to be left as a gap right there. And also that we have been asked to consider this in isolation without the consideration of the Waterworks trailhead that is being redone essentially just across the street and down. I'd say that my biggest disappointment though with this is the density. And I think that we all, every neighborhood has a responsibility to help solve this housing crisis. And when we see some neighborhoods absorbing most of our density, it becomes an equity issue, and I have concerns about that. Having said all of that, I don't feel like we, as
Ms. Becerra said, we do not have the tools to do anything else, and that's particularly unsatisfying. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Jordan?
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of similarities between the concerns of constituents between the River City project that we just approved and this one related to transportation and safety for pedestrians. And I think it's interesting to note that we kind of all have concerns when it happens in our own ward. I will be voting no on this one because I too agree that we need to be asking for maximum density, especially when it's this close to town. I'm guessing that these homes are probably going to be $1 million homes, maybe $750,000 to $1 million homes. And it's not addressing our housing affordability issue. It is not addressing density. We need to rezone and start planning ahead and really addressing these projects from a progressive, deliberate stance rather than voting yes based on existing code. I would really like to encourage developers. I know this isn't really kind of going to address their bottom line, but I'd really like to encourage developers to please include at least one house that is affordable, since we can't enforce it. But yeah, I will be voting no on this one because there are similarities, between this project and the River Road project, which I voted no on before. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nugent?
Thank you. You know, I think this has been an interesting conversation. I went and rewatched the committee hearing or the committee meeting on Wednesday and kind of listened to everybody's comments. And the bigger takeaway for me is I think that as we are prioritizing where we're spending money on roads projects and streets projects and sidewalks and bike lanes and all of the above, I think we need to make sure that better aligns with where this community wants to grow. And I think that's going to lead to maybe some hard decisions where popular projects that we would otherwise like, but might not solve immediate issues in areas we are going in the neighborhoods we're going to expect growth. I mean, that might come kind of full circle, I suppose, but the thing that really stands out is when we're talking about these developments, there seems to be an appetite for density, but I can understand based on kind of past history why some developers don't push for the maximum density because, you know, even in the comments on the last subdivision that we approved that my colleague Ms. Jordan referenced, you know, some of the comments talked about the developer trying to shoehorn as many houses in as possible to maximize their profit and things like that. So I think that we just need to be aware of how we have this conversation. And if a project comes in that's closer to the higher end of the density that we've called for in the growth plan, you know, maybe we should be embracing that more than we have. I also think that as we do code reform, you know, my colleague, Mr. Carlino was kind of getting at it. As we do code reform, I think that we need to look and see how our new code, how our new zoning matches maybe the higher end of some of our density, because that does seem to be more of the appetite that we're hearing. I do think given the we can only base decisions on our current policies, that predictability definitely does matter to developers bringing projects forward. And whether we like our housing system or not, we are reliant on private investment in our system. And you know, they need to be able to put a project forth that makes sense for them too. I agree that these houses will be on the higher end of a price point. I don't think anybody can sit here and say these 20 houses will be low income houses. I'd be remiss though if I didn't notice, and you're probably going to get sick hearing this from me, but that we need inventory at every level of our housing market. We have a churn problem in Missoula in addition to just entry level houses. We don't have places for people to downsize. We don't have places for people to move out of what would be traditionally be considered a family home and go somewhere else, opening that up for another young person or younger family or couple or whatever it may be who's trying to take that next step, which then opens up a entry level home for someone else. And you're seeing that in the prices in some of the neighborhoods that have traditionally been entry-level homes in Missoula. So the churn problem is there. I just checked before this meeting, and right now in Missoula, there are 18 houses listed for sale actively under $500,000. So, I mean, we definitely have a large problem. On top of that, active listings year to date are down 32% over last year, which means that, for the first 3 months, that's through the first quarter. So for the first 3 months of the year, there were 32% less options for buyers on the market in 2022 than there were in 2021. When we talk about all housing inventory is good, I think that's what we mean, but we need to be aware of kind of everything across the board. So I will be voting in support of this, but I wanted to acknowledge that I do think that the broader conversation that's come from this is very good. And I look forward to kind of having that with everyone, because while I don't know that these 20 units caused the issues that we have on Greeno Drive, they kind of highlight what the other 1,000 houses that are probably served by that road have kind of helped to create. I just think that that's something that we need to think about.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment tonight? All right, seeing none, we have had a public hearing and we can have a roll call vote.
Okay, and this is on all of the things, the ordinances, the variances, and the subdivision. Let's start this round with Carlino.
No.
Contos.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jordan. No.
Nugent.
Yes.
Savage.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasika.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
And Becerra.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 9 ayes and 2 nays and 1 absent.
Okay, thanks. And that concludes our items of final consideration. We do have one public hearing. State law and our city council rules set guidelines for inviting community comment in a formal way on certain issues. We'll have a staff report on the following item, and then the city council invites community comment. During the pandemic, the city council is holding public hearings open for a week and voting the following week, unless there's some specific requirement that we do otherwise. This item tonight is a resolution establishing Mullen Build water and sewer development fees. And we will hold this open until next week, till April 18th. And we have Logan McGinnis on the line for a staff report. Mr. McGinnis.
All right, thank you. I'm Logan McGinnis. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for Utilities. If I can share my screen, I have a little PowerPoint to show. Are y'all seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. This is similar to a presentation I made at the Public Works Committee, but added a few things to it. So this is an overview of the Mullen Build project scope. And so, as you're aware, we're moving forward with the project. And it's a transportation project, but we don't like to build out street networks without the necessary utilities in place before the street gets built. So this is about the utilities that will be installed with the Mullen Build project. So I think you've probably have all seen this. I'm sorry, this is a little fuzzy in terms of the numbers. I apologize. I thought I had a different slide, but I'll get to the numbers a bit later. When we submitted the grant, we had sort of local matching funds pledged, including the water and sewer costs. And I think the water at that point was estimated about 3.2 million and the sewer about 1.7 million. So those are a little bit less than what we had indicated in that application. I'll move on. I guess real quick before I move off this slide, I'll just kind of point out the areas that we are building out the streets. This blue number 1 is Mary Jane, what we're calling Mary Jane South. Blue number 2 is Mary Jane North. And, we're building out what's called George Elmer North here, north of 44 Ranch. And then this number 5 is England Boulevard. And then, of course, there's some work at the Mullen Roundabout, but that doesn't include any, for George Elmer, that doesn't include any utility work. So the build grant itself was $13 million. It did not include any funds to pay for utilities, as I noted earlier. And again, the utilities must be installed before these new build roads can be constructed. And again, the city agreed to bridge the gap to finance installation of the utilities until a latecomer fee could be established to collect those costs back from the developers who are benefiting from these investments. So just talk briefly about what's being installed. Water facilities are on the right. We're installing 16-inch and 8-inch water mains in Mary Jane South from Mullen to north of O'Leary. We're installing a 12-inch water main in George Elmer from kind of the north side of 44 Ranch to England Boulevard. And then a 12-inch main in England Boulevard from George Elmer over to Flynn. And then water service connections as desired by the developers. In terms of sewer, we're running an 18-inch sewer main in George Elmer from 44 Ranch to England. We're running an 8-inch sewer main in England from George Elmer to Flynn. Also an 8-inch sewer main in Mary Jane north of Camden. And again, sewer service connections associated with those main installations. You've seen the staff memo that we wrote up. This kind of tries to summarize the main aspects, I guess, reflected in the staff report. So overall, the developer is responsible for the cost of the utilities running through their property, which is certainly consistent with how, we do developments in town. The developers generally always pay for the mains that they need. Here, second bullet, the city is going to upsize to 16-inch water and 18-inch sewer mains. And we will pay for the main in the Mary Jane Roundabout at Mullen Road. As I noted, developer would have been responsible for the costs of these mains anyways at the time they developed. There's some benefits here. The build project will allow the developers to delay that cost until they're ready to connect. But with, these times with rampant inflation, this is locking in the pricing. So I think that's a real benefit for the developers. Just want to note that there are places where it's running in a right-of-way splitting parcels. And so in those scenarios, the costs will be split evenly between those two parcels. And one of the other, I think, big benefits for the developers, they avoid having to pay for offsite utilities. If this project hadn't come along and these parcels wanted to develop, a lot of these mains offsite would have had to been run to get mains to their property. So the developer here is having to avoid having to pay for any of those offsite utilities. Here's one of the exhibits just to kind of give you a little more idea of what we're doing and where. So this is the kind of overview of the water system improvements. There's 4 parcels here that we're asking to cover the cost of these water mains running through the properties. We developed some shorthand notation to talk about the parcels. So here, MJ 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the identifiers for these four properties. And similar up here, these are GE 4 and 5 on George Elmer. They would be responsible for the 12-inch water main running up George Elmer. And then again, we'll upsize to a 16-inch water main with utility funds. Over here, we call this parcel EB1 along England Boulevard. They would be responsible for this 12-inch water main. And then, mostly just some services that we're installing up here in MJ9, a little bit of water main work here in what we're calling MJ8. The property owners are listed here in this exhibit that's part of your packet. Similar slide for sewer. There is, I guess I forgot, there's a little bit of sanitary sewer work over here under the roundabout and to get, this is the portion of George Elmer South that is being modified as part of the build project. So similar here, we're running an 18-inch sewer main, but these parcels would be responsible for the cost of an 8-inch sewer main, which is all they would have needed. And again, here, 8-inch sewer main running along England Boulevard that would be paid for by the owner of this EB1 parcel. 8-inch sanitary sewer main over here in what we're calling parcel MJ8. And then some additional in being paid for by MJ9 and 10. So this summarizes the fees by parcel. So this is a little bit more detail than I provided in the Public Works Committee. And the fees are substantial. It's certainly expensive to run water and sewer mains, but like I said, these are costs that they would have been responsible to pay anyways. Total fees for water for the development developers would be about 2.3 million. The city's paying about 56,000 for the water main under the roundabout, and then about $205,000 the city's paying in upsizing costs for total water investment in the Mullen Build project's about 2.61 million. Over here in wastewater, we have about 1.2 million that would be paid for by the developers, and then about $96,000 in upsizing that the wastewater utility would be paying for a total wastewater investment on the project of about 1.3 million. And over here are just where I add up the cost for water and wastewater for the various parcels. So, one of them is nearly $1 million. It's a significant amount of cost, but, cost that they would have been subject to at the time of development. So in total, it's about $3.9 million in water and wastewater investments on the project. Talk a little bit about the outreach efforts that we've made to try to let these property owners and developers know. We had draft cost estimates back in October when we were pushing for the project to get kicked off sort of last fall, and then just had some delays. So they were provided these draft cost estimates back in October. And then more recently, with the final numbers, we've mailed out letters to each property owner. We've rounded up email contacts for various developers. A lot of these properties have sort of been changing hands as we go, as they, as development groups are purchasing them to move forward with developments. So we've reached out to engineers and these developer contacts that we've become aware of. The letters provided the fee details and notified them of this public hearing. And then just, in terms of collection, once the fees are approved, if they're approved, we intend to record an exhibit against each property so that any interested party will become aware of these fees that the property would be subject to at the time they develop. How are we going to collect the fees? So they will be included with other permit fees when the developer applies for the first water or sewer connection on the property. The way the resolution is written, our goal is to collect these fees back as quickly as we can. This is, we don't want the utilities to be holding on to these costs for a long period of time. We didn't want the fees to be transferred to the subdivided lots that are going to come out of these parcels, because that will, it'll create a ton of work for us to track them as they move from one large parcel to these individual subdivided lots, but also would significantly delay our time in collecting these fees. So when they go to make the first connection, they would be expected to pay that full water or sewer fee. So that is all I had to present tonight. I imagine there's questions. I'm happy to take whatever questions folks may have.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from council members? Mr. Carlino?
I might have missed this, but I was curious if the Mullen Build project included gas pipelines for gas heating or any sort of gas infrastructure like that.
There's a lot of private utility relocations going on. I am not the expert on that. I mean, I don't believe so. I mean, those are not in the roadways themselves, but I may have to get back to you on that. I mean, it certainly doesn't affect these utility fees for water and wastewater, but I'd be happy to round up some more information on that and get back to you if that would be okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. Logan, I'm curious, when we initially applied for the build grant, was it 18 million, I think, is that right? And we were awarded 13. And I'm just curious, with the original request, did that include, I'm sorry, it was a long enough ago, I can't remember, but did that include water and sewer? Would that have been included had we gotten the full amount?
No, that was always going to be kind of a local match.
It was, okay, thank you.
And it was, I thought it was this slide, I thought it was like 24, 25 million was the original grant request, and we got the 13 million.
My recollection was that it was 23 million and we
23,
were
okay.
13 million.
Yeah.
Additional questions, Ms. Cheryl?
This may not be the right time to ask this, but I am curious, do we have the opportunity to reapply for that, for any money for this area for improved infrastructure? Are we?
Yes, that is we are applying for additional funds. I don't remember how the grant name has changed now, and maybe Jordan remembers, but we are in process of submitting for additional federal funding on this project. It's due any day now.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and I believe that's the RAISE grant now.
Yeah, RAISE grant, thank you.
Program, but the new administration's iteration of it. Any additional questions? Okay, at this time, I would open the public hearing if anyone would like to comment. Okay, seeing none, this public hearing will remain open for a week, and we'll have opportunity to have additional comment and discussion next week. Logan, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I'm sorry. I emailed all of you earlier today. There were a few minor changes on the resolution and the staff memo that I made, and they were uploaded earlier today. I think they're pretty minor. They really had to do with the fact that it kind of occurred to me maybe too late in the game. There will be some minor changes as developers request either more or fewer water or sewer services. So that the changes in those documents is kind of, that's what the change is about, is providing some, I guess, flexibility to charge them for the actual number of water or sewer services that they request.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Okay, so that hearing will remain open and we can move on to our next item of business. There are no committee reports, nor are there any new items of new business. The mayor's absent tonight, so we'll go to comments from city council members. And we can go from left to right this time. Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. I just wanted to let everyone in our audience tonight give a heads up that there is a election on May 3rd for the school and special districts. The ballots will be mailed out on Wednesday, April 13th, and be sure to return those by May 3rd. If you have any questions about that, the elections office is located at 140 North Russell Street. That's on the corner of Wyoming and Russell. And they're open from 8 to 5. And you can also call them with any questions. And their phone number is 258-4751. Again, that's 258-4751 for the May 3rd election. So don't forget.
Ms. Cheryl.
Pass, thanks.
Mr. Nugent.
Thank you. Just quickly, I would like to thank our dedicated public commenter for continuing to talk about Rogers International. I think that whole conversation is very interesting. And I just want to acknowledge that we are listening to you, and I enjoyed the show and tell today.
Mr. Carlino.
Yeah, I'll second that. And the other thing I wanted to bring up too is just that I found out that everybody that parks at the public library that stays overnight, like in the morning, everybody gets towed by it's like a private tow company, and they charge, I think, $300 for a tow. So I feel like we should either have a city tow company that doesn't charge so much, or at least try and fix the library policy to where people aren't getting charged $300 to get towed, and then it all just goes to a private company. So I just wanted to just throw that out there, that I think our towing at the public library could be done better.
Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. I virtually attended the State of the Community today, and I just wanted to say that the mayor did a really fantastic job at highlighting
all the work that has been happening in our community to address really complex and really multi-layered issues, housing, our unhoused community, etc. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who works on a daily basis to improve on those really difficult issues. Thanks.
Ms. Savage.
Yeah, just briefly, I will also echo thank you to the public commenter, and I also enjoyed the show and tell this evening. I also just wanted to thank Emily Armstrong for coming back to our committee meetings this week to talk about all of the different housing, I don't know what you would even call them, housing options that her office is overseeing. I hope soon to be able to take a tour of the authorized campsite. And I think Councilman Nugent is going to as well. And I just really appreciated, as a new council person, sort of having an overview of all of the different pieces that are at play in that particular issue.
Ms. West.
Pass.
Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. A couple things. One, I too agree with Joe coming in and providing us comment every week about Rogers International. I think you're doing a really good job giving us some information that we haven't heard. I'd also like to let everybody know that there's a community meeting that's being organized kind of by myself and Willis Curdy related to some houselessness issues that are happening in our ward. It's going to be this Wednesday at 7 o'clock at the Orchard Homes Country Club. It's mostly for Ward 6 residents, but if you have an interest in coming and finding out more about what's happening in our ward and kind of some of the options and things that we're addressing, and you're more than welcome to come. And the third thing is I would like to really encourage my colleagues, if you have not recently or at all gone for ride-alongs with city fire and city police, to do so. I did both this weekend, and it goes without saying that we have exceptional people in these jobs. A couple things that came out of my ride-alongs are, one, that the fire department is looking for some funding to support mental health of their employees, and the police department, they're all using their own personal phones to make calls related to cases, and could definitely use their own phones or phones that are city phones, and so that they're not blocking their number to call victims or people who are witnesses. So yeah, please go and have a ride along. It was fantastic. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Contos.
I'll pass. Thank you.
And Ms. Anderson.
Thank you so much. I just want to say a thank you to the city public works staff and park staff, as well as I do think the city fire and police. We had quite a bit of a windstorm this afternoon, and I was doing my Monday afternoon Uber driving of my nephews, and saw many large trees down in parks and tree branches across roads. And when I took them their appointments and circled back, they had been cleaned up and marked as hazardous areas. And that just doesn't happen magically. That is dedicated public works staff, park staff. I know police and fire are out there helping with that. So thank you again for all of the hard work when Mother Nature likes to keep us on our toes. So thank you so much, and enjoy your Monday evening, everyone.
Thank you. And I'll just echo Ms. Becerra's comments that I had the pleasure of attending the State of the Community event today as well. And just appreciate Mayor Engen's remarks and everything that's going on at the county. We had a lot of enthusiasm in that from all three county commissioners, and President Bodner from the university as well, providing an update on all the good stuff going on at the university. So it's that event every year reminds me just how much interesting, meaningful, impactful work gets done within local government and at the University of Montana. And it's great to be a part of that and to hear about it. So we have no additional comments, and there are no miscellaneous communications, reports, petitions, or announcements. So without any further business, we will be adjourned.